I sit on the deck of my boat, watch the sun go down, and think about the years that have passed and how I ended up here. First, a little about myself and my life. My name is Frank Gibson. I am 49 years old at the time of writing. I am 5 feet 11 inches tall and weigh 210 pounds. I've never served in the military, and I'm not a kung fu master, although I did boxing at university, so I'm in shape. I run 2 miles every day when I'm not on the boat. I swim a lot and enjoy scuba diving. On land, I go to the gym twice a week and watch my diet carefully. In other words, I take care of myself. I'm not bragging, but people tell me I look like George Clooney. I have a brother Sam, we are twins, and he is 10 minutes older than me, so being the eldest, he inherits the title Sir Samuel Gibson. Yes, we are English and very, very rich. I'm talking about billions. My father is British and my mother is American, so we both have dual citizenship. We also have a sister, Patricia, 2 years younger than us. Father always told us not to reveal our capital because it would lead to problems. Just say you are wealthy and leave it at that. By wealthy, he meant that our family owned a corporation called Gibson Enterprises, which included shipping, real estate, pharmaceuticals, law firms, textiles, banking, and security, as well as several farms specializing in breeding stock, such as horses, cattle, and even sheep. My father introduced the farms as a hobby, and everything else was managed by trusted board members. We participated in the company's affairs as much as we wanted, and no more. Our empire extended throughout the world, but was mainly focused on Europe and the United States. My brother, I, and later Pat went to the best schools and universities. I studied business and engineering, Sam studied business management and animal husbandry, and Pat studied law and accounting. When Sam and I were in our final year of university, tragedy struck. Our parents died in a car accident. 2 days after the funeral, the will was read. All the property was left to the three of us, and we were to divide it fairly among ourselves. It was decided that Pat would run the law firms and property, Sam would take over pharmaceuticals, shipping and breeding farms, of which there were by then 6, 2 in the UK and 4 in the US. I got textiles, banking, and security. We also received a large sum of money, in excess of £2 billion each. Sam will remain in the UK and run the breeding farms. He inherited this interest from his father. Pat will complete his education and then settle in the USA. I will also be based in the US as most of my business is located there. Sam will be actively involved in the breeding farm program and will leave the management of shipping and pharmaceuticals to designated management boards. After Pat graduates, she will take a junior position at one of our law firms without revealing her true position. I will also hand over the management of my little empire to others while I pursue my hobby of buying out bankrupt businesses and turning them around without revealing my true net worth. I met my first wife, Laura, at a university party, and it was love at first sight. I asked her to go on a date, and she agreed. 3 months later, we became an exclusive couple. We were both not virgins, but we never talked about our previous lovers. A year later, we got married. Laura was a US citizen, so my move to the US was warmly welcomed by her parents. We both wanted to have children as quickly as possible so we could enjoy them while we were young. So it was no surprise that Heather was born 12 months later, followed by Graham 18 months later. I bought a small engineering company that was failing due to its inability to keep up with current technology, and Laura was a stay-at-home mom. Shortly after Heather's 5th birthday, Laura began coughing, and after 2 weeks the cough persisted, she was sent to the doctor, who referred her to a specialist for testing, and was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of cancer. She died 3 weeks later. I was devastated, but fortunately the children did not understand this and were not seriously injured. I completely lost myself and was sent to a convalescent home. Patricia came to live with the children while I recovered and came to terms with the loss. I was discharged after 8 months of self-pity, but had to see a consultant every week to make a full recovery. My sister suggested hiring a live-in nanny to make my life easier. I agreed, and we began interviewing candidates. We decided we wanted someone young so he could relate better to children. After 20 or 30 interviews, We hired a 24-year-old child welfare graduate named Megan West. Megan immediately fell in love with the children, and they fell in love with her. She was 5'7", weighed about 120 pounds, and had an amazing figure. I'm sure she could turn into a dead man. Megan's parents moved to Florida, but her sister Sarah lived only 50 miles away, so they were able to communicate regularly. She moved into the second bedroom and immediately settled in as if she had always lived here. She got up in the morning, prepared breakfast for me when I returned from my run, porridge for the children, and a hot breakfast for me. While I ate, she made herself breakfast, usually just toast and coffee. When I returned from work, dinner was already ready. We all sat down at the table like a normal family and discussed our day. When Graham started school, Megan asked if I would mind if she took courses at the local college to improve her chances of getting a job after finishing her job with me. I not only supported her in this endeavor, but also insisted on paying for her studies. In the evenings and weekends, the four of us could often be found at the movies, bowling, and then at McDonald's to the delight of the children. Megan also attended all of our family reunions and became like a daughter to Laura's parents. One day, about 3 years after Laura's death, the children and I were visiting Laura's parents when Laura's father invited me outside to show me his new car. While we were examining his Pride, he casually remarked, "Frank, it's been over 3 years since we lost Laura. It's time for you to move on. It's obvious that you and Megan are close, and Linda and I would love for you and Megan to be a couple." I almost fell from surprise. "What? Megan and I are just good friends. Frank, we've seen the way Megan looks at you, and she wants to be more than just a friend. Everyone seems to know this except you, even the children noticed. You can't live like a monk forever, you need to move on, and the children need a mother. She's a good girl, and the kids adore her. You won't find a better substitute, Frank, just think about it." I was stunned. My in-laws wanted me to remarry and replace their daughter. On the way home, I couldn't help but glance at Megan from time to time. Yes, she is very attractive, but I am 5 years older than her and not yet ready for remarriage, so I put Bill's proposal on the back burner and didn't think about it anymore. Megan passed her business management exam, and we all went out to celebrate, bowling and then dinner at Denny's. Heather is already 8 and Graham is almost 7, so they were allowed to stay up late as a holiday gift. Megan tucked them in, turned off the light, and sat down next to me. Not touching, but close. We were watching a Disney movie about a lost dog who finds his way home, and when I looked at Megan, she had tears in her eyes. I dried them and said I was going to bed and asked her to remember to set the alarm before going to bed. She said she was going to bed too, and then, without thinking, as if it was the most natural thing in the world, she kissed me and said good night. I stood there, stunned. She had never done this before, and I didn't know how to react. As she walked towards the stairs, she suddenly stopped, realizing what she had done, turned to me and put her hand to her lips. "Frank, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I did it. Please forgive me. It just seemed so right. I've had feelings for you for a long time, and it just came out. If you want me to leave, I'll understand, but can we just pretend it didn't happen and carry on as before?" "No, Megan, we're already past that stage. We can't ignore what just happened. It will make living together impossible. Please come here." She approached me, not knowing what I would do. I pulled her towards me and kissed her on the lips. After a few seconds, she began to kiss back, and we remained in this state for several minutes. She looked into my eyes and sighed. "I've wanted you to do this for a long time. I know it's a little early, but I think I'm in love with you. Do you think you can love me over time?" "Megan, I think I've been falling in love with you all this time, and I'm just now realizing it, but we need to take it slow for the sake of the kids. Oh, Frank, you made me so happy I could cry. Good night, Frank." And she went to her room, and I set the alarm and went to my bed, falling asleep almost immediately. At night, I woke up, feeling the blanket move, and felt a naked body pressed against me. It was my first sexual experience since my wife died, except for Mrs. Palm and her 5 daughters. We lay quietly, hugging each other, until I fell asleep. In the morning I woke up, looked at the clock, and realized that I had overslept and would not have time for my usual run. Megan was already up, and I smelled breakfast cooking, so I showered, got dressed, and went downstairs. I went into the kitchen dining room and looked into the kitchen. Megan looked up at me and turned beet red, and then quickly turned away. The kids grinned at me and went back to their breakfast. I later found out that they saw Megan leaving my bedroom in the morning and drew their own conclusions. 7- and 8-year-olds are not stupid. Megan took the kids to school, and I went to work. The following year, we got married. The children were delighted, as were my former in-laws. Megan signed the prenuptial agreement without even looking at it. When I said she should get a lawyer to check it out, she replied, "If this is what you want, then this is what I want too. I know you'd be fair if we divorced, but that will never happen unless you cheat on me, and even if that happens, I'll probably forgive you." This made me love her even more, but I still did not tell her about my true wealth. Graham had just started high school when Megan asked if I would mind if she got a job, as she was at home with nothing to do and was bored. I had no objections, and she began looking for work. About 3 months later, she was all excited when I came home. She had interviewed a few weeks ago and received an offer letter for the position of assistant private secretary to the showrunner of Ads International. Working hours were 9 to 5 with possible weekend work. But as a working mother, she could come in later and leave early to drop off and pick up her kids from school, but she would need to work from home to make up the hours. The CEO and owner of Ads International was Michael Dorn, who was 69 years old and scheduled to retire next year. His son Robert will move from New York to take over the reins. The company had contracts with many leading brands to promote their products, including 2 of my textile brands, although no one knew about my connection with these brands. The transfer of power went smoothly from father to son, and a company party was thrown at a fancy hotel, with Megan looking forward to dressing up for the event and meeting her new boss. I was waiting at the bottom of the stairs when Megan came into view. To say that she looked gorgeous would be an understatement. She was wearing a not-too-short black evening dress with pearls and a red shawl, as well as 15-centimeter heels. She took my hand, and we walked out to the limousine that I had rented for the evening. When we arrived, the doorman opened the limo door for Megan and I, and we walked in and checked in with the receptionist, who showed us to our table. We sat with Barbara, the personal secretary Megan worked with. The introductions were made, and the waiter brought out the champagne. As we sat and talked, I noticed 2 men approaching our table. One was clearly over 60, the other about 30 years old. When they arrived at our table, Barbara introduced them as Oscar and Robert Dorn, our hosts. Robert looked like his father. He had the body of an American football quarterback and looked tough and strong. We shook hands. Oscar's was dry and firm, but when I shook Robert's hand, it was wet, and he tried to squeeze my hand to hurt me, which only turned against him, as I withstood everything he could give and responded with the same force, with the result that he was forced to pull his hand from mine to avoid breaking bones. I immediately took an antipathy to him, especially when I noticed the way he looked at Megan. He undressed her with his gaze, and it took a lot of effort for me not to punch him in the face. We finished dinner and headed to the ballroom, where we sat with a few of Megan's friends. We danced a little and returned to the table to catch our breath. As soon as we sat down, Robert came up to us and asked Megan to dance. He didn't bother to ask my permission, which made me angry, but Megan looked at me and asked if I minded. I saw that she was in an uncomfortable position, so I gave my consent. I watched them dance around the hall and noticed that he was a much better dancer than me. When the dance ended, instead of walking Megan back to our table, he left her on the dance floor even when she tried to leave. I watched them dance for the second time and saw him put his hand on her buttocks, and she quickly removed his hand and continued dancing. This happened twice more. When I stood up to object to his behavior, Oscar came up to me and apologized, promising to talk to Robert. At this point, the music stopped and Megan was able to break free and return to our table, looking flushed and angry. "Frank, please don't make a scene. He's my boss, and he's had too much to drink. Just forget about it, and we'll go home." "Okay, honey, but I want to know what he said that made you so angry. When we get home, Frank. As we were leaving, I saw Oscar talking to Robert and shaking his finger at him, and Robert, noticing that I was looking, grinned at me. I didn't like where this was going. I trusted Megan completely, but not Robert. I needed to keep an eye on him. We arrived home and immediately went up to the bedroom. Megan didn't talk to me much on the way home and seemed worried. Okay, Megan, what did Robert tell you? Frank, please don't be angry and promise me you won't do anything stupid. It depends on what he said. I'm not mad at you, but I need to know. Frank, remember, he was drunk, so he probably didn't mean it. He said I was a beautiful woman and too good for you, and if I played it right, he would show me how good it could be, and that's when he squeezed my ass. I was furious and wanted to go back to the party and deal with this bastard right away, but Megan begged me not to, saying that she loved her job and didn't want to lose it. I said I didn't want her anywhere near that horny bastard and had to leave on Monday. She said she wouldn't have to see him anyway since his personal secretary was the only one he had contact with. I calmed down, but told her to let me know if he tried this again, and she agreed. Several months passed without any event, and then one night after we put the kids to bed, Megan said Barbara was leaving and she was offered her job. I asked her if she was going to accept the offer, and she said she was thinking about it. The following Friday, she came home and said she was going to accept the offer if I didn't mind. I reminded her of Robert's actions that night, and she said that since then he has acted like a true gentleman and has apologized several times. I told her I wouldn't stand in her way if she wanted the job, but I asked her to promise to tell me if he got out of line again. A few weeks passed in her new position, and she enjoyed it and seemed to thrive under the increased responsibility. The company held 4 workshops a year in Washington, D.C., where the CEO, all regional managers, and top sales executives gathered for a 3-day event. It was common practice for private secretaries to accompany their bosses, and Barbara always went with Oscar and then Robert. I didn't really like the idea of Megan leaving with Robert, but since it was part of her job, I couldn't mind. She was due to leave on Friday evening and return on Monday afternoon. I offered to go with her, but she refused, arguing that it would send the wrong message to her colleagues, and I did not insist. I got home early on Friday to take her to the airport. As she said goodbye and boarded the plane, she gave me a big hug and kissed me goodbye. We agreed to communicate via Twitter every night before bed. On Friday evening, I was sitting with my laptop at the dining table, and at exactly 10, I received an incoming call. Megan was thrilled with what she did and assured me that Robert was professional throughout the entire day. He invited her and another couple to dinner, and she was a little nervous, but the conversation was mostly about work. After dinner, he suggested they go to a nightclub to dance, but accepted Megan's refusal without any attempt to insist. We chatted for a bit, and then Megan said she needed to go to bed, and we said goodnight to each other. Saturday and Sunday were much the same. My fears were unfounded, and I was eagerly awaiting Megan's return. On Monday afternoon, I met Megan in the arrivals hall. We hugged and walked to the car. On the way home, she said that the trip was a wonderful experience, that she met all the people from other regions. I was just glad she came home and told her so, and that night we made up for the lost weekend and made love most of the night. A month later, Oscar died of a massive heart attack. He loved his cigars and brandy. Nothing had changed at Megan's work, and as the next conference approached, her workload increased and she often stayed late. She said one region was struggling and her office had to take on some of their work. I started to have doubts, so I asked one of the security companies I own to look into it. A week later, I received an overtime report that said that indeed one of the regions was struggling because their manager had suffered a stroke. I felt relieved and relaxed a little, lowering my guard. On Friday, when she left, it went pretty much the same as last time, and we connected that evening and everything was fine. I sat waiting for a call from Megan on Saturday night, but when she didn't call by 11 o'clock, I started to worry, so I called her and then sent her a message, both with no response. I went to bed with a very bad feeling and slept little that night. When I woke up Sunday morning, I called Megan again. This time she answered after only 2 rings. Hey Frank, sorry I missed our call. I went out for drinks with the other personal secretaries and lost track of time. I think I got a little drunk because I don't even remember getting put to bed, and when I woke up I had a terrible headache. I won't stay at the conference, I'm not feeling well at all, but I can't fly home until tomorrow, until 11 o'clock in the morning. Can you meet me at the airport? Honey, I'm sorry you're feeling so bad. Don't wait for the flight at 11. Go to the airport right now and call me when you arrive, okay? What will this give? There are no more flights today. Just do as I ask, and everything will open up. Okay, honey, I'll call you later. When I finished the call, I thought she sounded not only sick, but also sad for some reason. I immediately called a private airline and chartered a business jet to take her home. The flight attendant would be waiting for her at the check-in counter and would escort her to the plane. All I had to do was tell Megan to go to the counter and ask for a United Air representative, and everything would be fine. Megan finished her part of the presentation and sat down to applause from those in attendance. As the meeting drew to a close, coffee was served and small groups gathered, discussing mostly nothing. Megan found herself in the company of several other personal secretaries who asked her to join them for drinks at a club across the street, and since there was still plenty of time before Frank called, she agreed. The 4 secretaries sat in a booth, chatting and sipping cocktails. Megan didn't even notice Robert and his friends at the bar until Robert was next to their table. Hey Megan, would you like to dance? She didn't really want to, but she couldn't refuse without disrespecting him in front of his subordinates, so she agreed. He took her to the dance floor, and while they were dancing, she noticed that a couple of his friends were talking to other secretaries, but she didn't think anything of it. He insisted on a second dance and then walked her back to their table. Megan was very relieved that he didn't try to do something obscene like last time. She chatted for another half-hour and then remembered that she needed to return to her room for a video call with Frank. She quickly finished her drink, apologized, and left. She didn't see that Robert and one of his friends had followed her. When she entered the hall, she felt dizzy, walked to the elevator, and pressed the button for her floor. Entering the elevator, she felt her legs give way and tried to grab the handrail, but 4 strong arms grabbed her. When she got out on her floor, the 2 men holding her took her to her room and opened the door. Megan was in a semi-conscious state and did not realize what was happening. She was laid on the bed and Robert began to undress her. Another man made a phone call to the others who were at the club and asked them to come and take Robert's laptop with them. When the other men entered the room, Megan was lying on the bed, naked, but still semi-conscious. Robert took a small bottle from his pocket and poured its contents into her mouth. She choked, but swallowed. Robert. It was a concentrated dose of the drug. In a few minutes, she will be ready to have sex, but will not remember anything in the morning. Start recording. One of the men set up a laptop to record everything that would happen on the bed. Then everyone began to undress. Over the next 2 hours, Megan was subjected to every humiliation imaginable. She enthusiastically had sex with each of the men. Robert looked at the unconscious Megan and said, "I've wanted this little bitch for a long time, and I finally got it with a little help from drugs. We'll do it again tomorrow. I'll go see her in the morning and show her how accessible she is. And then I'll blackmail her into being our fuck toy whenever we want. See you in the morning." He then closed his laptop and walked out, taking her key card. Megan. I woke up the next morning with a terrible headache and realized I was lying naked on top of my bed. As I tried to remember what happened, I saw bruises and what looked like bite marks on my chest. I realized that I was having sex and my first thought was to take a shower and try to get clean. But then I remembered what I had seen on TV programs, that this was the wrong move if I wanted to catch these freaks, so I took out 2 bottles of water from the refrigerator. I drank most of one, then emptied both and collected as much evidence as I could and put it in bottles. I took a shower and returned to the bedroom, where I turned on the phone and saw that I had missed several calls from Frank. I decided to return home early, so I called the airline and found out that there were no flights until tomorrow. I called Frank, and he answered on the second ring. I apologized for missing our video call and made up an excuse for not calling on time. He seemed relieved, and then I said that I didn't feel well and that I would take the next flight home, but the next flight wasn't until tomorrow. He told me to go to the airport and wait for his call. I couldn't tell him what happened. I was too embarrassed and felt like it was my fault because I had gone out for drinks with my colleagues. I started to pack my things when the door opened and Robert walked in with my key card in his hands. "Hey, beautiful, just thought I'd stop by and thank you for an unforgettable night, and the guys would like to thank you too." I wondered why he had my key card and how dare he just walk into my room without knocking. "What are you talking about? And what guys?" He placed his laptop on my dresser, opened it, and pressed play. I almost fainted, seeing myself not only at the moment of sexual intercourse, but also as if I was enjoying it. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. "You drugged me with something, you bastard. I don't remember any of this. I would never knowingly cheat on Frank." "Of course not. That's why I pumped you up. As you can see, you really got into the spirit and enjoyed every minute. And tonight, you will enjoy it even more without drugs. Fuck you, you pervert. You'll never get to fuck me again. Now get out of my room." "Okay, baby, but keep watching this video and think about what your husband will do when he sees it. And he will definitely see it if you don't give us a repeat tonight. Oh yeah, don't try to delete it. I already sent a copy to my home computer." He then left the room, throwing my key card on the bed. I sat and cried for a few minutes and then noticed that the video had changed. I was lying on the bed unconscious, but there was a conversation going on in the background. As I listened, I heard Robert discussing with his friends that they had drugged me and were planning to blackmail me tonight. I restarted the recording and sent it to my laptop as proof. I quickly packed my things, including Robert's laptop, and headed to the airport. Upon arrival, I went to the restaurant, since I had not eaten since yesterday, and ordered breakfast and coffee. As I was finishing my coffee, my cell phone rang, and it was Robert. I turned on the record on my phone and answered. "Where are you, little bitch? And where is my laptop? Wherever you are, as soon as I get home, the recording will be sent to your hubby, so you can say goodbye to your marriage. If you come back now, I can forgive you and let you please me. Robert, go to hell." When I put the phone back in my purse, it rang again. This time it was Frank who told me to go to the United Air counter and give my name. I found the counter and told the receptionist my name. She made the call. A few minutes later, the flight attendant approached me. "Are you Mrs. Gibson?" "Yes, my husband asked me to come here. What's going on?" "I need to go home, but there are no flights until tomorrow." "Actually, there is. Your husband has ordered a private jet to fly you home. He must miss you very much to take such measures. Please follow me." She led me out of the main terminal to the car and opened the door for me to get inside. She got behind the wheel and we drove off. I saw that we were heading to the private sector of the airport and wondered what plane we would fly on. I was expecting a small, single-engine, noisy plane, but was pleasantly surprised when we pulled up next to a sleek twin-engine business jet. The flight attendant asked me to follow her up the steps to the cabin, took my coat to put it in the back, and told me I could sit anywhere since I was the only passenger. I chose a chair approximately in the middle of the salon and sat down in what could be called a luxurious soft chair. I was offered a drink, and I ordered a dry martini. It was served with appetizers. As I took off, I relaxed and all the tension left me. I started crying uncontrollably. The flight attendant came back and sat next to me, put her arm around my shoulders, but didn't say anything, for which I was grateful. When I finally stopped crying, the flight attendant introduced herself as Mandy and asked if I wanted to talk about it. I didn't have to ask twice, and I poured it all out to her. She listened patiently and then brought me a cup of coffee and said, "Based on what you said, you did nothing wrong. In fact, you did everything to bring these people to justice. As for your husband, if everything you said about him is true, he will understand and support you. Just tell him everything, as you told me, and I'm sure everything will work out in the end." We arrived at a small private airfield, and when we stopped, Mandy brought me my coat and carried my luggage down the steps. When we got off the plane, Frank drove up to us, got out of the car, kissed and hugged me, and then put the luggage in the car. He thanked the crew and thanked them generously, and before we left, Mandy took Frank aside and talked to him. As we drove home, Frank started asking me questions about the trip, but I asked him to wait a little, since I didn't feel ready to answer them at the moment, maybe a little later. When we got home, I went straight to the bedroom and pretended to be asleep when Frank came into bed. I felt Frank get up in the morning and heard him take a shower, but I pretended to be asleep again because I didn't want to talk to him. After Frank left, I got up, took a shower and went downstairs, made breakfast, and began to think about what I should do. I realized that I was too afraid to tell Frank what I had done, so I wrote him a letter explaining everything. I also left him Robert's laptop. I packed my suitcase and bag and left. Frank. I left Megan asleep and went to work. I would have stayed home, but I felt that she needed time to be alone. I was involved in the rehabilitation of a small advertising company that had lost its place in the corporate jungle and was losing money. I have been contacting some of my old rebuilt companies to start using this company to increase their income and have had some success. There was light at the end of the tunnel. My goal is to return the company to profitability and then offer the team a buyout option within 5 years. This is what I do. I find a troubled company, turn it around and sell it as a going concern to the team, and then move on to the next thing. It gives me great satisfaction, and I make many friends in the process. I tried to call Megan several times, both on my landline and on my cell phone, but she didn't answer. I finished work early and drove home because I was starting to worry that she still wasn't responding. When I arrived at our house, I noticed that her car was gone, and I was overcome with fear. I rushed into the house and called her name, running from room to room. Realizing that she was not at home, I went into the kitchen dining room and saw a letter lying on a strange laptop. A cold shiver ran down my spine when I saw her phone number and wedding rings on the letter. I opened the letter with trembling hands, and what I read almost threw me off balance. To my dear Frank. I left you, and when you read this letter, you will understand why. But first, let me say that I love you with all my heart and always will. I wanted to tell you what happened at the conference, but I'm too afraid to face you. I know that I cannot bear to see the pain and self-loathing in your eyes. I left Robert's laptop on the table, and I ask you to watch it to the end. At the end, listen to Robert's conversation with his friends, and I hope that after this you will understand that I was not in control of my actions, and I hope that to some extent you can forgive me. Please don't try to look for me. I don't deserve your pity or forgiveness. I shouldn't have gone drinking with my colleagues to begin with. I didn't know Robert would be there, and when he asked me to dance, I should have said no, but I didn't. Therefore, it is my own fault that I found myself in this situation. I left you my rings because I no longer have the right to wear them, and please tell the children that I love them. I know that after you see the video, you will hate me, but not more than I hate myself. Please send the divorce papers to my sister, and she will give them to me to sign. Once I've come to terms with what I've done, I'll contact you via email, but until then, my laptop will be turned off, so please don't try to contact me. Please take revenge in any way you see fit. I'll even testify if necessary. Once again, my love, I cannot say how much I love you, but my heart is breaking, and I feel like I have already died. Please believe that I never wanted this to happen, and I wish with all my heart that I could make things right. Farewell, my love. I will always love you. Megan. I read the letter twice and burst into tears. It seemed like hours had passed, but in reality, only a few minutes had passed. Then I watched the video and threw up. How could someone do this to my Megan? One thing I knew for sure, they would pay in full. The first thing I needed to do was find Megan. It was not her fault, and I was worried about her condition, afraid that she might harm herself. I called her sister, who assured me she hadn't heard from Megan, but promised to tell her to call me if she showed up. When she asked what happened, I told her the short version of events, and she was as furious as a hornet's nest and promised to do everything in her power to help. I then called my sister Pat because I needed legal advice. I explained what happened and Pat said she would take the first flight. The next call was to the CEO of one of my security firms, Securicom, which specialized in deep background research and surveillance, as well as a lot of other not-so-legal work for letter agencies. I asked to speak to CEO Paul Spencer, introduced myself as Frank Gibson, and was connected immediately. I asked for a full investigation into Robert and sent a short video of 5 men having sex with my wife and asked for an attempt to identify them. I also handed over all the information about Megan, including her photo, and asked them to find her. My sister arrived the next morning, and I told her what I had done so far. I showed her the letter and video. My sister is a corporate lawyer, but she has many friends in the Department of Justice. She called one of them, who referred her to his friend, the district attorney. After many phone calls and about 2 hours, an appointment was made at the Dawes office for the next morning. We arrived at the district attorney's office and introduced ourselves. We showed him the video and the subsequent conversation. He said he has a clear case of kidnapping and unlawful use of a controlled substance. When I told him that Securicom was looking for the other 5 men, his attitude towards me changed, and he asked how I managed to persuade them, since they usually only work for government agencies. Damn, the cat is out of the bag. I had to admit that I own the company, but it's not widely known, and I'd like to keep it that way. He assured me that he would be careful, just like everyone else. I showed him the letter, and he promised to announce a general search with the note, "Do not detain." He also said that he would hold off on charging Robert until the other men were identified, and that I should not do anything stupid in the meantime. I said I wanted to meet with Robert and try to get him to destroy the copy of the video. He agreed with this, as it would look strange if there was no action. We discussed what I should do, and after a while we agreed that I would visit Robert. I arranged a meeting with Robert under a false name, under the pretext of using his company to advertise a non-existent product. I didn't want to be recognized, so I put on a simple disguise: 2-inch heels, a fedora pulled down over my forehead, and a beard. I almost laughed when I saw myself in the mirror. The makeup artist from the FBI said that most people see what they want to see, and I should pass for someone else. I arrived at his office a little before lunch, and was immediately ushered in as his secretary was more interested in her lunch than in checking my documents. I entered his office and closed the door behind me. He didn't even look at me, he just motioned for me to sit down. I sat quietly and looked at his slightly balding head as he worked at the computer. After a couple of minutes, he looked up and extended his hand to me. I stood up to shake it, but instead I slammed it into his desk. He pulled his hand back and held it under his arm, looking scared when I introduced myself as Megan's husband. "Hey, asshole, you made a big mistake when you touched my wife, and you will pay for it. First, you will delete the video from your computer, and then you will give me all the copies that you have. After this, I'm going to beat you up, and you won't be able to tell anyone about it. What makes you think you can come into my office and threaten me? I'll call the police and have you arrested for assault, asshole. Oh yeah, and Megan has a great ass and sex like a bitch. Now get out before I punch you in the face. As for calling the police, I have your original recording, including the part where you admit that you drugged her and had sex, so it's you who goes to jail, not me. I don't want Megan to go through that kind of humiliation, so I'll be happy if you delete your copy and give me all the other copies." From the look on his face, I knew I had him, and he had nowhere to go. He opened a copy on his computer, and I deleted the file, and then used a cleaning program to permanently remove all traces of its existence. When I asked about the copies, he denied having them, but subconsciously looked at the painting hanging on the wall. I moved the picture aside and found a safe. "Open it. Go to hell." I leaned over his desk, grabbed him by the lapels, and even though he was bigger than me, I pulled him over the desk and threw him to the floor. He quickly came to his senses, stood up and tried to hit me. I just stepped aside and threw 2 quick punches to his ribs and a right cross to the jaw, and he fell unconscious. Damn, I needed him to be conscious, so I went out to the water cooler, got the bottle, and poured it on him. He came to his senses, coughing, and tried to get up. but I put my foot on his throat and held him down. Okay, asshole, what combination? Fuck you. I pressed a little harder on his throat to block the air and asked the question again. A combination? He tried to push my leg away until he slowly turned blue. I gave him some air and raised my eyebrows in question. He croaked a combination, and I let him breathe, but left my foot on his chest. Don't move if you want the best for yourself. I went to the safe and entered the code. When I opened the safe, I took out its contents. There were several work papers and a box full of flash drives, all with women's names on them. There were also at least a dozen CDs with women's names, including Megan's. I put them all in my briefcase. I also found a small bottle of pills, picked it up by the edges to avoid fingerprints, and put it in the envelope. I pulled Robert to his feet and threw him onto a chair. Now, pervert, print out the names and details of the other 5 perverts who were with you. He looked at me as if he was going to refuse, so I spanked him a couple of times to spur him on. He still looked stubborn, but he did what I ordered. I then looked at the list and put it in my briefcase along with other evidence. I pulled him out of the chair and pushed him against the wall. Looked into his eyes. Now, asshole, remember, if you go to the police, 2 things will happen. First, I will send all the materials to the district attorney. Secondly, I will send copies of all your CDs to the husbands of the women you have had, and for the rest of your life you will be looking over your shoulder, not knowing who will get to you first. Now take the beating like the coward that you are. And then I started getting revenge for Megan and all the other women. A couple of good blows to the ribs, stomach, kidneys, and face, and he was unconscious again and almost unrecognizable. His face looked like a chop. I left just as some of the employees were returning from lunch, walked 2 blocks, and caught a taxi that took me to the train station. I went into the men's room, took off my disguise, picked up my car in a nearby shopping center parking lot, and drove home. The hat, beard, and shoes went into the dumpster behind the homeless shelter. The first act of revenge is complete. 3 weeks have passed since that day, and I have not been idle. I gave everything to the DAW with copies for Securicom. I still hadn't heard anything about Megan's whereabouts and was now seriously concerned. There was an uproar about Robert's beating, but the police investigation ended at the train station and died out without further leads. The DAW asked me if I knew anything about it, but I denied everything, and he just smiled and left it at that. Megan. When I left home, I just drove along without a plan and no idea where I was going. After about 2 hours, I stopped to rest and drink coffee. I needed a plan. I called May, an old school friend, and asked if I could stay with her until I figured it out. She lived alone and said she would welcome company. I still had about 150 miles to drive to her apartment, so I had a lot of time to think. I missed Frank terribly and really wanted to just turn around and run into his arms. But I needed time to heal, and Frank needed time to come to terms with what I had done. I knew he would try to find me, so I needed to somehow disappear. So I used my debit card to put gas in the car, then went to the ATM and withdrew the maximum amount of cash. I did this twice more in smaller towns. In one of the major cities, I pawned my jewelry, including the Rolex Frank gave me for Christmas, and walked away with a check for over $12,000. This was supposed to last me a couple of months until I found a job and permanent housing. I came to see my friend. She was delighted with the meeting, but she saw from my face that something was wrong. Okay, friend, what's wrong that you look so depressed? I told her the whole story, interrupted by tears and sobs. So it's not your fault. Why don't you stay and figure this out? I take it you still love Frank. Oh God, yes, more than anything else. That's why I couldn't stay. I couldn't bear to see the pain in his eyes that I had caused. Well, I think he's a really good person, and if he loves you as much as you love him, he'll understand. Call him and talk. At least let him know that you're okay. Maybe later. For now, I need to rest and think about everything. Where can I hide my car so it won't be seen? Put it in the back. It can't be seen from the road or the sidewalk. She'll be safe there, and we'll cover her later. I went into the spare room to unpack and lay on the bed until I fell asleep. May woke me up, saying that dinner was ready and it was time to go down. Over dinner, we discussed our lives and chatted until almost midnight. The next day, I went to the pharmacy and bought dark brown hair dye, then went to the hairdresser, where they gave me a new haircut and dyed my hair into a bob. Then I walked around the city looking for work. I needed to fit in somehow and have something to do. I applied for a waitress position at a family-owned diner, and since I was the only applicant, started the next day. When I told May about this, she said that if I didn't have to work, she would be happy to support me. But I explained that I needed to occupy my head with something and take my mind off my problems. A few days later, May showed me a local newspaper that had an article about a businessman who had been severely beaten and would spend some time in hospital. I realized that Frank was taking revenge for me, and I hoped that he would not go to prison because of me. I told May what happened, and she laughed out loud. "Darling, you have an amazing husband. I hope he never gets angry with me." Over the next few weeks, I worked at a diner, a job I began to enjoy, especially interacting with children. I missed Heather and Graham so much. Sometimes I cried myself to sleep thinking about the family I left behind. May finally convinced me to contact Frank and let him know I was okay. I wasn't ready to talk to him yet, so I sent him an email. "My dear Frank, I'm not ready to go home yet, but I thought I should let you know that I'm safe and staying with a friend. I love and miss you all so much it hurts. I saw what happened to Robert, and it only makes me love you more. Please let me know if you can forgive me. I am constantly tormented by what I did. Hope you and the kids are okay, and tell them I'm thinking about them. If you can't forgive me, I will understand, so please let me know, and I will never contact you again. All my love, Megan." Frank. I had just finished dinner, and the kids were clearing the table when my laptop beeps for a new email. I opened the email and saw that it was from Megan. I felt nauseous with relief and began to read. After reading it twice, I wrote a response. "My dear Megan, there is nothing to forgive. You did nothing wrong. You were the victim of a violent sexual predator, and you are not to blame for anything. We miss you so much. The kids keep asking when you'll be back. I love you so much. My heart hurts every time I think about you, and I think about you all the time. Please come home and make our family whole again. Megan." My dear Frank, thank you for being so generous. I'm really going to come home, but I need to figure myself out and find myself first. You see, I really feel like it's partly my fault, and I need time to get over the shame before I can look you in the eyes again. Please try to understand me and be patient. Frank. Okay, if that's what you need, I respect your decision. Please stay connected and know that you can return home to your loving family at any time. Miss you. Love, Frank. I sat down on the sofa, my dinner completely forgotten. The most important thing was that she was safe. I closed my laptop and felt better than I had since picking Megan up from the airport. The next day, I told my sister, the DA, and Securicom about my conversation with Megan. The need to find Megan was now a secondary concern because I knew she was safe. Thanks to my conversation with Robert, we now knew who the other members were, and Securicom began a deep investigation into their backgrounds to find anything that could help us against them. At the same time, a completely illegal cyber search of all their personal documents was launched. While this was going to take some time, I decided to take some of the revenge myself, using my vast wealth and corporate connections. I called my sister and told her my plan. She said what I was up to was immoral, but legal, and she liked it. I contacted Securicom and instructed them to find out who the 5 largest clients of Robert's company, Ads International, and its subsidiaries were. Within a week, I had the list I wanted, and I was surprised that 2 of the companies on the list were mine. In fact, we were number 1 and number 2 on their list of clients. I launched Operation Burn the Bastard. I have ordered the CEOs of our 2 companies to immediately cease their association with Ads International and contract with their worst competitors to serve as our advertising consultants. I ordered them to pay all early termination fees on demand and move on. I then set up meetings with the remaining companies on the list, and informed them that it would be in their best interest to terminate their contracts as Ads International would soon be involved in a sex scandal, which would negatively impact their business. As an incentive, I offered to cover all penalties for early termination of contracts. All the companies agreed, and I started working with smaller clients using the same principle. 3 of the other 5 members worked for Robert, so they would go down with him, and the other 2 were buyers for different companies. I decided to deal with them on a personal level. When they were arrested, their spouses would receive copies of the video. Almost overnight, Ads International lost over 80% of their business, and their line of credit was withdrawn after a short conversation with me at the bank. The next day, the DA said he wanted to talk to me, and I agreed to meet at his office. When I arrived, I noticed that there were 2 men in suits and a sheriff with him. He introduced them as FBI agents and explained that the disks and flash drives revealed that there was more than just sex with Megan. There was evidence that similar things had happened to at least 20 other women since Robert took over the company. It is clear that Robert used these women as incentives for company representatives to use Ads International as an advertising agency. The FBI was also interested because it appeared that some of the women were being forcibly transported across state lines to entertain his clients, which constitutes kidnapping. In addition, it turned out that more people were involved in the case than we expected, and they would also need to be identified. The FBI has already identified 2 judges, 1 congressman, and several top businessmen involved in what appear to be political privilege in exchange for sex and possibly bribes. This is also being investigated by the FBI's cyber team, so gathering information will take longer than we initially anticipated. I offered to help the FBI with Securicom to expedite the process, and they gratefully accepted the offer. The district attorney promised to keep me informed. While all this was going on, my contact at Securicom told me that he had all the information on 5 other men. I made an appointment with the head of operations for the next day. I arrived at the company headquarters and was shown to a middle-aged man who introduced himself as Sam Turner. I informed him that I was the owner of Securicom, and he confirmed this with the CEO before agreeing to enter into discussions. After my credentials were confirmed, he ordered us coffee and asked how he could help me. I told him the whole story, and in response he asked, "So, what do you want us to do?" When my father led the organization, you had a strike force ready to go anywhere in the world at any time to protect our interests. Is this possibility still available? Yes, but we are not murderers. We are a paramilitary group, not your private bandits. If I needed bandits, I could find them on any street corner. I need professionals who will do the dirty work, but won't kill anyone. If you can't help me, can you point me to the right place? What exactly do you want them to do? 6 men drugged my wife with some drugs and had sex with her. I dealt with the instigator, but I want the others to get what they deserve. Not to kill anyone, but I want them to spend at least a week in the hospital and for them to know why. Okay, I can arrange it, but not with my people. I know a few mercenaries who could do the job, but it would cost money. Money is not a problem, half up front, the rest after the work is done. Agreed. I will contact you. Later that week, I received a phone call. It will cost $1 million, half now. Not now. If I transfer money to you, there will be a trace. I'll bring you cash tomorrow, okay? This is acceptable. Don't delay it. By 2 o'clock the next day, I had collected the cash, some in euros, some in pounds sterling, and some in dollars, and sent it by courier. The task took 2 weeks to complete, but all 6 men ended up in the hospital. I paid the rest of the money with a smile. Megan and I exchanged emails a couple times a week, and we always told each other about our love and how much we missed each other. 2 months passed before I heard from the district attorney. "Frank, we have all the evidence we need to charge 43 people with various crimes: blackmail, illegal use of a controlled substance, kidnapping, accepting bribes, recording sexual acts without permission, and assault. We're going to arrest them all at once next Friday." I relayed this information to Megan and asked when she would be coming home and received the following message. "Frank, I'm so glad it's almost finished. Can I come home next Saturday? Megan, I can't wait. While all this was happening, I did not sit idly by. My acquisition team took Ads International into bankruptcy and set it up for a hostile takeover. I told the team to go ahead, and the company was mine in less than a week. I walked into the Ads International building with a team of lawyers at my back. I had a list of people I wanted to get rid of. As I walked through the building, I called names and fired them on the spot. My last call was to Robert's office. When I opened the door, I saw him sitting at his desk with his head in his hands. I went inside, followed by a lawyer with a camera and 2 security guards. "Hey, Robbie, lousy day," I said. He looked up at me, and the look on his face was just priceless. "It's you. It was you, you damn bastard. You destroyed me." "How? It wasn't difficult. I just told all your clients what you really are like and showed them some photos, after which they rushed to get rid of you as quickly as possible," I replied, "especially when they found out that some of their wives were the main characters in your videos. I'm sure you'll be looking over your shoulder for a long time." He moved quickly for a big man, jumping to his feet and charging at me. I easily dodged his clumsy blow and took a step forward. 2 powerful blows to the ribs and a right hook to the jaw, and he fell unconscious. His new assistant Alice came in with a glass of water and poured it in his face. "Bastard, you were going to do this to me at the next conference. I hope they destroy you," she said, then hit him in the groin and left the office. 2 guards picked him up and led him to his car. "Stop. His car belongs to the company. Call him a taxi and make sure he leaves the building," I ordered. I called all the secretaries to a meeting. "So I just fired all your bosses. I think you know why, so I won't go into detail now. All I will say is that if I find out that any of you were involved in their crimes, I will fire you too, and also refer your affairs to the authorities. However, if you come forward now and confess, you can leave with a neutral recommendation. Nobody wants to come forward. Fine. Now, I'm sure many of you are thinking that you could run your departments just as well, if not better, than your previous bosses. Well, I'll give you a chance to prove it. Starting today, you have all been appointed temporary heads of departments. Depending on your performance, your position will become permanent after 3 months. I know the company is at rock bottom right now, but I'm confident you can turn it around. I will be in this office as long as you need to learn how to run a company. Now go and start rebuilding the company. Alice, please stay. Alice, I will remain CEO as long as you need to learn how to run a company. Then the position will be yours if you want. Thank you, Mr. Gibson. I promise I won't let you down. I'm sure you won't let me down. Now go on with your business." On Friday, the day of reckoning arrived. Several prominent businessmen, 1 congressman, and 3 judges were simultaneously arrested in all 5 states. I watched it all live and finally felt that justice was being done for those who used women to achieve their goals. I didn't sleep much that night, knowing Megan would be back the next day. It reminded me of when I was a little boy on Christmas Eve waiting for Santa. I got up early on Saturday, showered, and got dressed. I couldn't bring myself to eat breakfast. I only drank coffee, nervously waiting for Megan to arrive. I sent the kids to Megan's sister's house for the weekend, so we could have time to be together and rebuild our relationship. I continued to look at the clock, which did not seem to move at all. Then I heard a car drive into our garage. I almost ran to the door and opened it, and there stood my Megan, as beautiful as ever. I noticed that she had changed her appearance a little. Her hair was now short and blonde, but what bothered me most was the expression on her face. She looked scared and fiddled with her hands nervously. I walked up to her and pulled her into my arms. At first she didn't react, but then she hugged me tightly and burst into tears. "Oh, Frank, I wasn't sure you'd forgive me for being so stupid. Are you really happy to see me? Have you forgiven me? Can I go home? Do you still love me?" She blurted out in one breath. "Megan, I never stopped loving you, and there is nothing to forgive you for. Please come in. This will always be your home. You were used, but your courage in revealing all this will save other women from the same fate and bring relief to those who suffered the same way as you, since all the men responsible have been caught. It may take time to come to terms with what has happened, so I have arranged several counseling sessions for you. That night we slept together, but without sex. I felt that she was not ready yet, and we just snuggled together and fell asleep. Over the next few months, we watched the legal drama unfold. 7 women who had been pressured took the stand as witnesses, so Megan did not have to testify. 15 men were charged with federal crimes, including a congressman and 2 judges. All 15 were found guilty of numerous crimes, and their sentences ranged from 20 years to life imprisonment. The rest were found guilty, and their sentences ranged from 15 years to life imprisonment. All 5 states also saw a wave of divorces. At the Gibson home, life returned to normal within months. One evening, while we were watching the news, the announcer suddenly interrupted the broadcast. "We bring you urgent news. It has just become known that an inmate at the state prison was killed while walking in the yard. His name was Robert Dorn, and he was serving a life sentence for kidnapping. Details later." Megan and I looked at each other and fist bumped in joy. It's finally over. 5 years have passed. Heather and Graham are studying at university and doing well. Megan sits next to me on our 40-foot yacht, and we watch the sun go down together. I slowly stroke her rounded belly, where our twins will soon appear. And subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.